The oceans are under assault, suffering from shifting baseline syndrome, or what we might think of as a mismatch between human memory and the world each human generation inherits. Beneath the sometimes calming, sometimes roiling ocean waves is an ecosystem absorbing more acidity, heat, eutrophication, extraction, and degradation than at any time in human history. Several years ago, the then harbor master in Monterey, California, told me that the ocean is confused. That much of this confusion and deterioration happens beneath the waves, unseen by most. The baseline of ocean health is shifting beneath us. We live on an ocean planet. It is the ocean that drives the climate, makes the weather, and is the source and foundation of all life on Earth. Since I was 13, I have lived within at least 30 miles of the ocean, and most of that time much closer. And this is one of the many reasons why I'm excited to highlight Andrew Lewin on today's episode of Earthbound. Andrew is a marine biologist, podcaster, and communications manager for Pisces Oceans. His mission is to advance our understanding of the oceans through science, strategic communication, and the kind of storytelling that moves people to act. Lewin pursues his mission with his podcast, How to Protect the Ocean, the Speak Up for the Blue podcast network, and various other consulting and media projects. Andrew Lewin's expertise, easygoing style, and narrative insight help reveal the story of the sea, its inhabitants, and how the health of the planet depends on the health of the ocean. Following are highlights from our wide-ranging conversation covering the state of ocean science and, yes, shifting baselines, playing the long game as a means of maintaining optimism, deep-sea mining, the UN Convention of the Law of the Sea, plastics, adopting a blue mind, and more. So let's not dally. Here's Andrew Lewin, scientist, podcaster, storyteller, and oceanpreneur. Andrew Lewin, you've got quite a career. You started out as a researcher and scientist in marine protected areas. So I assume that you're familiar with the Monterey Bay.
I am very much so. Like the California coast, the network of MPAs that they have there that in Southern California as well.
And so you call yourself an oceanpreneur?
It's not, I didn't coin the term because I've seen it used before. I may have just like picked it up from somebody, but I feel as though like I growing up, wanting to be a scientist, wanting to be a researcher, getting into that, being able to work in that. And then life happens. I fall in love. Mm-hmm. I marry that person and we live in Ontario, to raise our family because we wanted our kids to be around our grandparents and like our parents and their grandparents. Mm-hmm. And so I had to shift sort of my outlook on what I was going to do for my career. So I'd bounce around between environmental consulting and government and nonprofit work and so forth, but I couldn't really find something I loved. And, it kind of gave me that hustle energy, where you're just like, you're trying to find your next thing. You're trying to find what you love. And so what I fell in love with other entrepreneurs and online, and that's how I discovered podcasts was through an entrepreneur. And I started listening to a lot of entrepreneurial podcasts and videos and things like that. And so I really got into that. And I was like, you know what, like something that's missing from the ocean conservation industry that I feel that I hadn't come across. Now there's plenty of people who have been doing it and who continue to do it to this day, but have that little bit of an oceanpreneur feel. Like they are innovative. They want to show that they can not only make money, but have a social enterprise, have this social and environmental mission to them to do that. And I wasn't seeing it a lot. I saw a lot of nonprofit organizations, and with the nonprofits, they're great organizations for the most part, but they're always struggling to find funds and this and that. And not everyone, like people do a very good job. You've seen some phenomenal, and I've interviewed some phenomenal nonprofits, and they work their tails off to get what they can and to do the work that they can. But I want to show like you can be a profitable business and you can also talk about the ocean and do things for the ocean. And that's sort of what I've been bouncing around trying to do. Now, have I been fully successful in it? No, but I'm working at it. I'm working at it.
I think you're talking about the ocean. I'm in my wheelhouse, so I know about ocean acidification and
of course,
oxygen depletion and all the nutrient runoff and all these things. But I don't know how widespread the knowledge is of what we're doing to the ocean right now.
it's not as widespread as you would hope.
That's too bad.
It is. And it's not because there aren't enough people talking about it, but even 15 years ago, when I started my journey at talking about the ocean, speaking up for the ocean, going through school, like I did my university late 90s, early 2000s, did my master's early 2000s. And even then, not a lot of scientists were out there really doing science communication, especially like the academics where I was. Nonprofits obviously had their communication departments, because that was a big part of their mission, was to talk to people and get their base to support them in the work that they do. But government, very controlled coming out. I worked for government, especially depending on who's in power, as we know. I live in Canada, so we have it too sometimes. And, we were very controlled of what we could talk about, what we couldn't talk about. Certain parties allow that, and other parties allow you to go free. But, there are other points where academics, they weren't talking because they were afraid of the media. Not that they were afraid to speak out. They were afraid what the media would do with their words. They would manipulate them a lot of the times, depending on who owns the newspaper or the magazine or the online stuff. And so they were very concerned about it. And so when I started speaking, like I started writing a blog, as I mentioned earlier, there were two major blogs that are still out today, deepseanews.com and southernfriedscience.com. And they were a conglomerate of scientists and researchers. Some of them were younger than others, and they all had different levels of graduate work. Some were in graduate studies, and they would just kind of talk, and they would do fun blogs. So, the one on Deep Sea News, probably one of the more popular ones, was 10 reasons why dolphins are, I'm not going to say it because I don't know if you allow swearing, but a bad word, and so, like a butthead, let's just say it was kind of like that. And it had like 10 reasons of sort of natural tendencies of dolphins and interactions with humans or other animals that you wouldn't expect from a dolphin, because you think it's always smiling. And so it was like, it was educational, but entertaining. They had a way to do that. They took the ocean cleanup project and basically decimated all of their points of how they can clean up the garbage patch. And to this day, like I refer to people to those articles because that's how you do an analysis. Like they got oceanographers that were there. They understood what was happening. They understood what was going wrong. And they understood what the ocean cleanup project wasn't listening to anybody, and they just decided to keep going on. And eventually the Ocean Cleanup Project reinvented fishing. Essentially, they use nets to try and grab all the fun. And now, like if you look at the Ocean Cleanup Project, and I have a problem with this project because it continues to say that it's cleaning up the ocean, and now most of their videos are AI, and so you're just kind of like, I don't even know what to believe. Geez. So yeah. But these were the communication tools that people were using, and they were a little bit, not rebellious, but they were a little bit edgy, and they were talking a lot about it, but they were providing facts in a very interesting way. Southern Fried Science was a great one. Dr. Andrew Thaler would write articles about hagfish, probably one of the ugliest animals in the world, but talking about how there was a hagfish spill on a van. I guess it was for aquaculture reasons or whatever, and all the slime was all over the road and everything like that. So it's just like, it was really cool stuff, and it was important to me to get that information out there. And what really triggered me to start the podcast or even videos before that was I had a family member, the extended family, who were like, "Hey, Andrew, like this climate change thing, is this something I need to worry about?" Mm. And this is like 2010. I'm like, Yes, it is. And I was like, Tom, I was like, why are people like so worried about asking? Why are they so cautious about acting or not thinking that this is a big deal? Like I went through school where we were saying in 20 years, climate change was going to be the biggest problem, the biggest threat. And it is, right? Yeah. 20, 25 years later, it pretty much, the prediction came true. But, I realized, I'm like, people don't know about the ocean because there's, at that point, with the internet really running wild, Facebook starting, Twitter starting, YouTube, in its infancy, but really starting to get hold, there's so much competition for information. Tabloids were like the top at that point. People knew more about what the Kardashians were doing than what was happening in the ocean. And they would believe more what the Kardashians were doing than they would what we were telling in the ocean. And it was really like, I realized quickly, I read a book called Don't Be Such a Scientist by Randy Olson, Dr. Randy Olson. Great book. He's like a pioneer in science communication. He was a Harvard graduate in marine biology. He was teaching, I believe, at Harvard. And then he decided to stop, realizing that people need to learn more about the ocean and started doing documentaries. But he taught me through his book of like scientists speak facts, right? We speak to the brain. Like I will say that, hey, we are close to the 1.5 degrees. Now we're over it. Or last year we were over it. We need to get below that 1.5 degree if we're even close to helping in reducing climate change. Yeah. You hear that and you're like, yeah, no, I get that. That makes sense. So like people who are in the conservation and the climate change sort of avenue get that. But if I tell that to my wife or the kids or my neighbors or things like that, they're just like, I don't even understand why that's important. It's 1.5 degrees. Like, who cares? If it's 25 degrees, I'm happy. It's warm outside. That's all I care about. We're in winter here in Canada. People are like, once it gets 8 degrees Celsius, people are like, this is beautiful. I can put shorts on now. This is the weather I want all the time. They don't care about the numbers, right? Yeah. But if we start saying, hey, by the way, remember when we got flooded 2 weeks in a row and you don't get insurance now because your basement keeps flooding? People care about that. Yeah. You know what I mean? Or it's like, do you not want to have that? Do you not have to worry about insurance? People care about that. They care about what's happening to them. And so it's like, but you have to get he taught me to go for the emotion, like go for the gut, not the brain. And so start to get to people's emotions, whether it's sadness or laughter or something. So my podcast, unknowingly, so I had an old professor tell me, he's like, Andrew, how do you do it where you speak everybody's language? And at first I was like, I think he's telling me I'm not smart. What is he trying to do? What do you mean by that? You know? Yeah. And he's like, no, you just speak everyday language and it's really nice because you can include everybody. And I was like, oh, okay. No, I'm not insulted anymore. Yeah.
Invoking the infamous line from the movie Network, "We're mad as hell and we're not going to take it anymore," is admittedly my interpretation. But Lewin acknowledges the serious damage being done, some of it irreparable, but he looks to a longer game where people reclaim their agency and refuse to be led by knaves and fools. For what is lost, much can still be recovered, preserved, and reimagined. The optimism question. It's the question I ask nearly everyone I converse with on Earthbound. Where do you find it? How do you maintain it? What is worse, pessimism or apathy? How do you balance the realities on the ground with hope for a better world? How do you stay optimistic in the face of these headwinds that we're facing?
You know, I look at the long game. Mm-hmm. I look at the long game. And right now we're in the short game, right? And damage is being done. There's no doubt about it. I'm hoping this is the short game, to be honest. I'm really, as a Canadian, I'm hoping this is a short game. I believe there's a bit of a movement happening where there's more of a disconnect than ever of not necessarily political divide, but I feel like almost like a financial divide. There's more and more people who are the billionaires of the world who are just so out of touch with reality, with what everybody else is going through, that I feel like there's a bit of a stir coming up and hopefully a change on the horizon of what is expected for everyday living. So, for instance, you know, the President of the United States, when he was running for election, he ran on lower grocery prices, lower eggs, lower interest rates, all that kind of stuff. He hasn't, and no wars.
And no wars. Yeah.
He hasn't done any of those.
Nope.
Right? Like if we look at the reality of the situation, he hasn't done any of those. The politicians who are usually the richer class they've done a really good job in letting us forget that and kind of distracting us in the day-to-day kind of things. Now, look, it's been hard to watch friends of mine and colleagues of mine lose their jobs at NOAA. NOAA is and always will be one of the best scientific institutions across the board, from anywhere from, and of course NASA as well, from space down to the depths of the ocean. The people that work there, bipartisan for the most part, you know, loving the ocean, loving space, loving the planet, just want to do better for the planet. This has been their dreams. And I think a lot of the times, yes, they could probably clean up some waste, but let's be honest, the waste they're trying to clean up is more for political gain and fossil fuel development. And so the hypocrisy is being laid out for everybody. And I think this next election, the midterms, I think it's this November, correct?
That's right.
2026.
Yeah.
This will tell whether people are listening, you know?
Yeah.
Cross fingers. This will tell whether people are listening. So I have hope and optimism that as a species, we will prevail from this encouragement of the unintellectual, right? Like, you see it in the podcast industry. The major podcasts that are around are bro-y type, unintelligent, I guess more right wing, but don't really know what they're talking. Don't even know if they're right wing or not. They're just like very like man-ish, misogyny type thing, and very basic. It's just very basic. But the thing is, there are a very high number of podcasts that may not get the limelight that people are listening to that are intelligent, but also personalized to people. So they're very personable. So you can connect with the people and you can understand that, like life is difficult. It's not like black and white, right? It's not red or blue. You mentioned it with Catherine Lacefield in your last episode, especially in your intro. You're just like, just because you love animals and you want to protect animals doesn't mean you hate people. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like because you want people to be able to have a livable wage doesn't mean you hate people who have businesses and want to succeed. I think that has been very well manipulated in the political sphere.
Yeah.
And so I'm hoping that we're starting to realize that as a species and start to say, hey, you know what? We're just part of this. We are not above this. We do not control. We manipulate and we have a big influence, but we are part of this. And if we start to realize that we are part of this, and we're starting to see it more in conservation now, especially with oceans. I'm not as familiar with land, but especially with oceans, we're going back to listening to indigenous people whose lifestyle is we are a part of this natural world. So let's be thankful and let's be grateful and let's give back as much as possible. So so ocean conservation is moving towards that. And I feel like policy is going to move towards that. It's whether we can get these ignorant politicians who are just out for money to realize that that's where everybody wants to move to.
But for these ignorant politicians, apathy, not agency, not demand for change, not being accountable with honesty and transparency is exactly what they want.
That's what they want. They want the apathy. Yeah. I don't know if you've noticed this, but I've noticed this a little bit here and there. We saw that back in the 80s and 90s, it was all about denial, right? These fossil fuel companies were like pushing out their billions of dollars for marketing campaigns to be like, no, it's not true. Like it's denial, 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 denial. Then they kind of went like, oh yeah, we're helping. We got all this carbon capture stuff and we're doing this and that. That was all BS. Like that never happened. And then now I find they're like, I found some who are like, you know what? Yeah, climate change is happening. It's real. There's nothing we can do about it.
Yeah.
So you might as well let's just continue on. Keep buying the products. Like, don't worry about it. We'll be fine. Like, let's just go on. And so they're banking on apathy, and they're very good at what they do. And they come out with strategies, and they pay people a lot of money, and they have a big backing. They're almost in every avenue, every TV station, at some point in time, every government pocket, whether it's blue or red or whatever color you go with, orange here in Canada. And you're just like, wow, like this is a big thing. But I feel like we're at a point right now, and this kind of gives me the optimism too. It's like renewables are here. Like they're being developed, even if countries aren't talking about it. Like I have a friend who works for a hydro company here in Canada. And I asked him, I said, hey, like I know like the government hasn't really been totally transparent on how much stuff is going on, but how much are you guys using renewable? He goes, you don't understand how much we've been developing. Like, we don't talk about it because it's not popular, but we have a lot of renewals. And in Canada, we look at our electricity, hydroelectricity for us, because we have so many lakes and rivers, is massive. Mm-hmm. Like it's 80% of our electricity in Canada. Okay. So we're practically renewable. We have nuclear, which, there has its problems, but also generates a lot of power.
According to the UN Environment Program, approximately 11 million tons of plastic enter our oceans every year, or roughly one garbage truck full every minute. Plastics, the bane of our existence and something we can't live without. A treaty was mandated in March of 2022 by UN Environment Assembly Resolution 5/14 to end plastic pollution with a legally binding agreement covering the full plastics life cycle. The treaty was originally due to come into force by the end of 2024. So how's it going? Care to guess? Yup, stuck. The past year has been about failure and reset rather than progress. The split is between a majority of states seeking an ambitious treaty and a minority of petrochemical-producing nations, and you can probably guess which ones those are. A small minority of oil-producing countries have used the consensus rules to stall or water down agreements at each round, even when greatly outnumbered. The unresolved question is whether the text focuses on plastic production or end-of-life waste treatment.
We look at plastic pollution in the ocean. Plastics are like 30% of revenue from oil and gas and chemical companies. And so you see the UN plastic treaty that's trying to get put through, and you see 200 lobbyists at these from the oil and gas industry and chemical industry that are there to just sort of like derail this whole thing. I was at a friend who works for Oceana. He was on the podcast, and it was when they had the meeting in Ottawa. He said they would come up to people from other countries, right, coming in, because, obviously it's a UN meeting, so there's people from all over, but they were sort of advocates for oil and gas. And so they'd have all these posters and billboards and everything like that, and they're out there speaking. They're like, plastics are good for us and this and that, and blah, blah, blah. And so they had conversations with some of these people, and they're like, hey, just like, do you have a background in this? Just having conversations, and the people are like, no, actually, we don't know anything about plastics. We were just paid to come here. But they're getting minorities to come through to speak up, and they're like, yeah, we just like, it was a free trip to Canada. Like, it was cool. Like that, and it's not to take away from any of them, but, they're taking money to promote misinformation.
Yeah.
And so you're just kind of like, oh, okay. So like, they're just everywhere. And so we have to build those, we have to expose them, like expose the companies and everything like for doing that.
Yeah.
And then we have to look at what's good for us as a species. A lot of the times when we go environmentally friendly or eco-friendly, it's usually good for us. As long as it's not greenwashing, it's usually good for us in health and good for us for our wallets. And, so you're just kind of like, oh, okay. And now we're at a point where it's like, it's even cheaper. Like, it's like, okay, like, let's go with this,
So what is the state of the UN plastic treaty right now?
Unfortunately, it was supposed to. So they had a meeting in South Korea back in November of 2025, I think, or October 2025, or maybe in the summer 2025. I can't remember. It was in 2025. It was supposed to be the fifth and final meeting. They were supposed to have an agreement made, and then that was hopefully going to be ratified. It wasn't made. It got derailed again by these lobbyists, and certain countries wanted to derail it. And so it's still in negotiation. So I think they're supposed to have another one. Don't quote me on this, but I think it's like in Africa somewhere, in Nairobi maybe, or Kenya. I'm not too sure. But back there, that's where I think it first started. So they're still pushing forth. Unfortunately, like the U.S. has kind of pulled out, which is a big player in a lot of these international UN agreements. So that's going to hold up a lot of stuff. Hopefully we can get some agreements with other countries. But it's a game, right? You see that we even saw this with the International Whaling Commission. Like Japan used to, when they wanted the moratorium lifted, they used to like bribe smaller countries who had equal votes, and they were like, oh, we'll give you schools, we'll give you this, we'll give you that, we'll partner with you if you give us a vote for whaling. That happens at international agreements all the time. You just never hear about it.
Yeah. So
it's an interesting game to see what happens in these kind of things. And again, they keep getting exposed, and people keep finding out, and environmentalists and nonprofits get a little smarter every time, and they try and rebuke. It'll get passed.
Who has jurisdiction over the open ocean? If you're 201 miles from a nation's coastline, it's kind of a mess. Nobody, or everybody, or anybody. That's not exactly the case, but it comes close when considering biomass extraction and deep-sea mining. The good news is that the agreement under the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea on the conservation and sustainable use of marine biological diversity of areas beyond national jurisdiction, more commonly known as the BBNJ Agreement, or thank God, the High Seas Treaty, is a legally binding instrument for the conservation and sustainable use of marine biological diversity of areas beyond national jurisdiction, beyond that hard, watery border of 200 miles. The agreement came into force in January 2026, but as Lewin says, coming into force and real enforcement aren't always the same thing.
Means that in international waters where nobody has control, we are able, with the agreements of the people of the countries who ratified this, be able to put in marine protected areas. So for instance, there is a big fishery for squid along the, they call it mile 201. So the exclusive economic zones along each country is 200 nautical miles.
Right.
So 201, you see on the coast of Argentina in the South Atlantic, you see a number of different fishing vessels, fishing fleets that just line the 201 border.
Yeah.
And so when the squid do their major migration, as soon as they come over that line, boom, they're fishing like crazy. And there's nothing that Argentina can do about it. But it's reducing their fishing pressure because these are short-lived species. They have a 1-year life cycle. So you keep taking things like that, they can't reproduce. They're on their way to reproduce, but they can't because there's not going to be as many. And so they just keep taking and taking and taking. So imagine with the High Seas Treaty, I'm not saying this is going to happen, but what's the hope is that they put a marine protected area in that area. And then they can enforce it. Because right now, the Coast Guard for Argentina can go up to mile 200. They can't go over 201. They can't enforce there. But now they might have the power to do that through the High Seas Treaty. And I think that will be huge, with that enforcement.
Do you anticipate the enforcement would actually be enforced? Or did
well, I mean, that's the theory.
Yeah.
That's always the theory. But it allows countries to do that. So if Argentina wanted to protect their fishery and their people, because like the squid are not just an important fishery for Argentina, they're an important predator species as well as prey species in that food web. So if they disappear, that's going to disrupt that food web, which is going to feed and prosper for all of Argentina. So they have skin in the game, let's just say, to protect it. And so if they have the ability to enforce it, they might throw out some ships, or they might, use satellite imagery to look at it. They might start enforcing users to keep their AIS, their GPS trackers on so that we can see where they are. And, they might work around it. And if we're able to protect that spillover effect might work beyond those borders and might help those distant fishing fleets to still prosper, but not take up everything.
As for deep sea mining, Andrew explains, the ISA, or the International Seabed Authority, which is part of UNCLOS, the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, meets regularly to discuss the regulation and future of deep sea mining. Countries operating under the ISA want caution and restraint, generally, before going headlong into raising the ocean seabed with little understanding of the consequences. Others, particularly those not party to the ISA or UNCLOS, see a business opportunity. And as a side note, the United States signed the UNCLOS treaty decades ago, but has yet to ratify it. Another thing I wanted to ask you about ocean seabed mining.
Oh, yes, the deep sea mining.
Deep sea mining.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
There was some meeting, there probably has been since I talked to these two scientists, but I'm wondering what the state of play is on deep sea mining right now.
It's been interesting over the last few years. So you have, on one side, you have the International Seabed Authority. It's the UN International Seabed Authority, the ISA. And that is a group of countries that are signatories on the UN Law of the Sea. So it's called UNCLOS is what it's called, Convention of Law of the Sea. And unfortunately, the U.S. is not a signatory. They've never have been. It wasn't Trump. This has been a long time ago, so I don't want to blame everything on him.
Okay.
But we'll get to him in a minute because he's involved in this now, of course, as one would think. And so you have that International Seabed Authority that meet about twice a year to discuss regulations or coming up with regulations on deep sea mining in the future. Back in 2015, there was a moratorium that was agreed upon all countries. And of course, there's a couple of countries that want to do a little bit of exploratory deep sea mining here and there. I think there was one in Papua New Guinea. There's been some in a few sites here and there just to kind of figure out what's going on. There's been a lot of research going on, but also like the big question is like, we know virtually nothing in comparison about the deep sea. Right. We do not know if what we are going to do by sucking up these nodules, how that's going to affect the deep sea processes. At one point there was a paper that came out saying these polymetallic nodules, which is have the cobalt and have all these little metals in there that we talked about earlier for batteries.
Right.
A lot of them, like the people are talking about, they create oxygen. Oh, okay, well, now that's different. That puts a little wrench in a lot of people's plans.
Yeah.
And so at one point, the ISA was chaired by a guy who seemed to be leaning more towards the deep sea mining companies. And for a while, we started to notice there was a fast tracking of the regulations so that we can get more mining processes out there. And so there was a couple of years ago, there was a big uproar, and somebody challenged this chair to a vote to be like, hey, I want to be chair. And I don't remember the name of the woman. I apologize, but she's now the new chair. She got voted in. But get this, she's an oceanographer, a scientist. Imagine that, a scientist in a position of power where they're coming up with regulations. So she is very much on the side of let's make sure we don't screw this up. Now, I talked to a friend of mine, Dr. Andrew Thaler, who I highly recommend if you want to do a deep dive into deep sea mining. That is the man you want to talk to, or even Dr. Diva Aman. Both of those are very knowledgeable in deep sea mining and speak out to it a little bit more. They know the industry, they know people in the industry, and they have a very sensible, scientific mind when you go into it. And anyway, Andrew was telling me about how these processes work. And there's different types of deep sea mining of what they're looking at these little nodules that are sitting on the bottom and have been there for millennia. And then you have hydrothermal vents, which are these very high temperature, like 400 degrees Fahrenheit, black smokers, like very toxic sulfur. They give off sulfur, not oxygen, but very unique areas that people want to mine as well. But that seems a lot of that's taking out chunks, and you're going to mess up these deep sea hydrothermal vents. Then you have the seamounts where you're taking chunks off a seamount, but a seamount is very diverse and it holds a lot of biodiversity of animals, and it's very important. So these mountains and seamount areas, these are very, very important. So the polymetallic nodules seem like the right way to go. But the problem is now is you have the ISA's we have Dr. Andrew Thaler is we have a chance to do it right. If this is going to happen, which will happen at some point, if this is going to happen, we have a chance to finally get it right and make sure we do the proper regulations, the proper monitoring, the proper enforcement. In comes 2025. And so that was sort of the course of nature for a while. And then now this is all in the high seas zone, right? So this is not anybody in their own exclusive economic zone, so that 200 nautical mile zone, can do anything they want. Yeah. As long as their government approves. Right. And so in comes 2025, Trump becomes president once again. And we start to hear rumors that the metals company, which is actually a Canadian company, is starting to go and is running out of investment money because it's a lot of money, starts to go to the Trump administration and says, hey, we have an idea. You can mine in your own exclusive economic zone, and they can't, nobody can do anything about it. Why don't we start deep sea mining? And of course, Trump's Mr. Let's exploit any kind of natural resource possible, whether it's fossil fuels or the deep sea, who cares? He doesn't care about regulations. He doesn't care about that. So, in comes this process now we start to see, and there's all of a sudden there's these sites that they start to propose for deep sea mining. Now, of course, in true colonial fashion, they start with the indigenous islands, so the Pacific Islands, so the American Samoa, and then so they opened up a public comment period for American Samoa, and then they opened up a public comment period with very little time back in December for the CNMI, the Mariana Islands. And then now there's rumors are starting to go to I think they just put it out for Virginia, and there's rumors of other places. So they're putting out all these areas that people are we're interested in this. And it's kind of like an RFI, what do they call them? Request for information, instead of request for proposal. They're trying to see what's happening. So that opens up a public comment period. Now, the public comment period just closed yesterday for the CNMI. Now, in the American Samoa, it closed before 2005 ended. They were very against it. People were the people of American Samoa, people in the U.S., there was I don't know how many, but there was a lot of petitions being no, we don't want it. From my analysis from a friend of mine, Angelo Villagomez, who's from Saipan, he works in D.C., he's saying now that there's about 60,000 signatories that say we do not want this to happen in CNMI. No deep sea mining. Now, the island of Guam already said no, so they can't even open it. The municipal island just said, the territory said, we're not even going to engage. We're not even going to talk about it. So that's where we're at right now. Now, there's also rumors that the administration has their eyes set on the, I think it's called the Claritin-Clipperton Zone, which is in the high seas area.
Yeah, I've heard of that.
Which is like very studied. It was actually, there was a study that just came out on that where there was some exploratory deep sea mining about 2 years ago. And 2 years later, they looked at what the biological diversity looked like before. And they looked at it 2 years later, what it looked like. And 50% of the species that were found in that area did not recover from that deep sea mine. So we know there's an impact, even though it's just like getting off the surface, we know there's an impact. Now, let me just talk to you a little bit about, I know this is a long answer. I'd apologize.
That's fine.
But
that's fine.
Let me just talk about what this system's going to look like. Because a lot of people are like, oh, it's deep sea mine. They're just going to grab the stuff and they're going to go. This is not just like an ROV goes down. They just grab the stuff, puts it in a bag and then goes back to the surface. This is like a vacuum there's going to be a machine on the ground. And there's going to be like a tube from that machine that is going to go from the deep sea. So when we're talking deep sea, we're looking at 2,000 to 3,000 meters below the surface, right? And then that tube is going to go all the way up the water column to a surface, to a ship of some sort. Now, you can't just do this, especially at the beginning, with just one ship. There's going to be a lot of ships. It's going to be like a little city of ships, very much like the sort of little city that they have in Louisiana with all the oil platforms.
Oh, yeah.
They call it Platform City, I think is what they call it. So it's going to be very similar like that. So there's going to be a bunch of ships. There's going to be support ships, all that kind of stuff. And of course, they're going to be on these islands, like the people. They're going to have to fly there to get out to the ships to go out and do this kind of stuff. Think about what a vacuum is going to sound like. Mm-hmm. And you know how sound travels through the ocean. There's going to be local disturbances for marine mammals, for seabirds, we know sound affects animals in the ocean. Yeah. And so that's going to affect, how that's going to affect it, we don't know. But there's a lot of migratory species that go along, very important ones that go along, and they need sound to communicate with the rest of their pod. And we don't know how that's going to affect it. So that's sort of what we're looking at from an operational standpoint. And that's kind of where we're at right now from a permission and permit standpoint. So we'll see what happens. I assume that, unfortunately, like this administration is going to look at the public comments, ignore it, and do whatever they want anyway. Yeah,
probably. Yeah.
Now, with that said, it may not be viable for people to do it. We don't even know. It's still exploratory at this point. And it may not even happen until after Trump's 4 years. Yeah. And God forbid he gets in again or he stays for whatever reason, or the Republicans stay on. We should, I can't see it happening. I hope that it doesn't happen beyond that if we decide not to, or we do more research.
Why are we drawn to the ocean? It is the source of life on the planet, so there's that. But our land-loving primordial ancestors crawled out from the sea more than 3 billion years ago, long before humans eventually emerged on the scene. And yet we seek communion with it, drawn to its at once calming blue waters, fierce majesty, and expansive beauty. It is the blue mind, Lewin explains, a source of solace, well-being, and immense gratitude in the midst of our fractious, anxiety-ridden human landscape.
There was a great scientist, unfortunately he's passed away, but in your area, Dr. J. Nichols, who wrote a book called The Blue Mind. And he really defined it. He was a sea turtle biologist, known for he was one of the first scientists to watch a tag sea turtle go from Baja California all the way to Japan. And he changed his career trajectory to write a book on the blue mind, which basically he teamed up conservationists and himself with neurobiologists and neuroscientists, looking at the effect of nature and the ocean on our brains. Mm-hmm. And, he's like, why do we go to the beach, or why do we go to a cottage where there's water or where there's an ocean? It's because the actual color blue is calming, and to be out on the ocean, or to be out just in nature itself, is common. We are in a society of anxious people because we are stimulated by information. We can't get away from the information. You and I have talked a lot about information that we have found on videos, online, in articles, and everything like that. We probably need to disconnect a little bit just to get back into nature.
You're right.
To sleep better and to not be as anxious and not have panic attacks, or that I get sometimes when I think about this too much. Being out in nature, like Jay Nichols, defined it perfectly. And that book was like redefined a lot of the way ocean conservationists went about getting people to just get back into nature. Let's worry about less of the 1 degree, 1.5 degree, and let's get back into nature. Because then all of a sudden you're like, I really like this. I don't want to get rid of it.
Yeah. I think, when you do that, when you get out, it grows your gratitude, and then
100%.
There's something to save here. Let's save it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Like seeing animals, seeing birds, listening to the birds, it all matters, right?
I love to watch the pelicans. They're so graceful, and they're flying great it's just great to watch nature.
Well, and now in Monterey, I know, unfortunately, there was a devastating shark event that happened recently, but
a couple weeks ago,
you're seeing an increase in great whites in those areas.
We are, yeah.
That's pretty cool. Like, other than what happened there, which doesn't happen a lot, to see these massive animals come north is pretty cool. Like, from a nature perspective, maybe not from a swimmer's perspective, but from a nature perspective, like, that's a conservation success story. And to be out there watching, coming across and seeing a fin every once in a while, you're like, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Like to see something like that.
Yeah, it really is.
You're probably by one of the most stunning coastlines
I know.
in the world.
There's no reason for me not to be completely
right.
grateful for this.
Yeah.
So tell me, listeners, about Speak Up for the Blue in your podcasts.
Yeah. So Speak Up for Blue is a network of podcasts that I'm building, all surrounding like information on oceans and wildlife, and how we can, become better stewards of the ocean. Not necessarily by going out and picking up plastic or anything like that. Obviously, that's part of it, but just like day-to-day life, just living for a better ocean. So if you're thirsty, you bring your reusable container for water instead of going to the convenience store and buying a plastic bottle of some kind of sugary drink that you probably don't need in your life. And so it's just like little things like that. So the idea is to educate people on the ocean awareness and what's happening, and then teach them how you can speak up as well, how they can speak up, and then how they can live for a better ocean. And that's through How to Protect the Ocean, which is my flagship podcast. And then I have another podcast that I co-host with Dr. David Ebert, who's actually from the Monterey area. Another guy I would recommend that you have on. He's known as the Lost Shark Guy. Phenomenal individual. He's been in the game for over 40 years. And during his lifetime, he has discovered and described over 50 species of sharks.
Cool.
Like really, really very scientific, very cool, fun guy to talk to, and in the Monterey Bay Area. So he'd be a cool guy to have.
Cool.
And so we talk about shark science. We talk about careers in shark science by getting people on and talking about their careers and what they do and how their careers have kind of meandered in and out of shark science. Because a lot of people that we meet, young people who are like, hey, like, how do I become a shark scientist? And you're like, well, it's not easy, but you can do it. But don't expect like a straight path, which a lot of people do. And if they don't get it, they feel like they're failures. And it's a lot of, build up and a lot of pressure on them. So we just talk to people who have been in the game from 5, 10, 15, 20, 40 years and just see how their lives meander. And they get to hear about their favorite authors, like journal authors and, things like that. Dave himself has, I think, published over 30 textbooks, like 30 books, like just in general on describing different species of sharks and the sharks of the world and ghost sharks and all this. And he mentors other people, and it's just phenomenal. So he's a great guy. So it's fun to do that podcast. We get along really well. And then I have a new podcast out called Polar Bears and Flip Flops. And that is a live podcast that we do on my YouTube channel on Speak Up for Blue TV. I do this with Angelo Villagomez, who's a very good friend of mine. He is from Saipan in the Mariana Islands, and he lives in DC, and he's very much focused on ocean conservation. He was the person I mentioned that was looking at did the post on the deep sea mining and the public comments. He's very good at advocacy, very good at understanding science and speaking the science to people. Probably one of the up and comers in the game of ocean conservation. So we basically do a live show and we talk about, we'll talk about a story. Like last week, we talked about how great whites were, there's a story that came out that great whites were nearly going extinct in the Mediterranean, which, we didn't even know there was a population in the Mediterranean. So just like candid conversations that we would probably have regularly, and we kind of just share it with everybody, and hopefully that will develop. We just started it, just at the new year, so that's new. So you can get that on Speak Up for Blue TV, and if you just want to go just to find out anything, speakupforblue.com is my website that you can go to, and you can get all the different podcasts and stuff like that. The How to Protect the Ocean podcast, I think I'm about to publish 1,862 episodes. So
that's excellent. How often do you publish?
3 times a week on that episode.
Wow. On
that podcast. And then we do once a week for Polar Bears and Flip Flops. And we do once every 2 weeks for Beyond Jaws podcast, which is the shark podcast. Yeah.
So full-time job, sounds like.
It should be. It should be. We talked at the beginning about monetization, just not there yet. I do have a full-time job that's in like software and customer success and that kind of stuff that I do full-time. And then I come and I do this. And as I live in Ontario, it's what keeps me connected to the ocean. It's what keeps me connected to my colleagues and my friends that I've made over the last 20, 25 years in this game, and allows me, the goal is to do this, full-time in science communication, full-time, to be able to get out there and help more people become aware and help organizations become aware. I'm starting to do some consulting with organizations and reaching out to organizations to help them with their consulting or with their communication, because sometimes they don't have the funds or the money to do that kind of stuff. And also do podcast management on the side, as I think you do as well. So
keep yourself busy, and you take your dogs out for walks. So
take dogs out for walks, coach my daughters in hockey, and as a true Canadian, and we do all that stuff. So it's I sleep well at night.
Good for you. Yeah, I think what you bring to the table, from what I can tell, is your scientific knowledge plus your ability to communicate. As one of your professors said, you
Thank you.
Are very personable, and well, like you said, you bring it to people's, get past the head and go into their which is critical.
The gut,
if the facts and figures were going to move people, it would have happened a long time ago.
100%. Yeah. It's so important as a scientist to learn that. Every scientist, I think, should go through some kind of science communication course in college as we learn, because communication is key. And you're starting to see more and more scientists use, sort of document their life as a scientist and talk about conservation issues and talk about issues that they face on a day-to-day basis, or even just life. Like like they'll take videos of a day in the life of a scientist, and one's diving in the Maldives, the other one's on the coast of Carolinas enjoying, their team, and also, platforming other scientists and getting them into science communication. It's just wonderful, and I think we see, like, through science communication, we can platform a lot more people. It's one thing I try and do on the podcast, but also just support others who are doing the same work. And in the past, we've seen a lot of selfishness, and trying to keep some people down and not up. And my goal is just to try and share as many people, because look, not everybody's going to love me. I know that, some people are going to connect with me. Some people just won't, and that's fine. The idea is to get others to talk and get others to do the same, so that they connect with those people and they have their own audience, and then we can just
spread the word,
branch out, spread the word.
That is the advantage. We talked about the dark side of all the online media. This is the bright side. You can reach people with the right kind of message.
So important. So important.
Well, thanks a lot for your time. It was a great conversation. And
Tom, I had a fantastic time. Thank you for being patient with me. I know it's a long episode, so I appreciate it.
No problem.
A lot of fun.
It was indeed a lot of fun talking with Andrew Lewin, and insightful as well. We covered a lot of ground, from effective ocean science communication, or the lack thereof, maintaining optimism and fighting apathy. And remember, apathy is what they want. So fight that. Then we went on to the High Seas Treaty and deep sea mining, and finally the Blue Mind, how the ocean calms the savage beast within and fosters gratitude. And that is where I will leave it, with gratitude. For Andrew Lewin and ocean scientists, communicators everywhere, and for the blue ocean that has been part of my home, indeed everyone's home, for as long as I can remember. Check the show notes for more information on Andrew Lewin, his Speak Up for the Blue Network, and other topics discussed in this episode. I'm Thomas Schoenemann, and this is Earthbound, Stories from the Anthropocene, Life on a Warming Planet. If this episode resonated with you, if you like what we're doing, please leave a rating and review wherever you listen. It genuinely helps us and helps others find the show. And if you haven't already, subscribe so you don't miss what's next. Thank you, dear listener. I'll see you in a couple weeks, and in the meantime, stay safe.